There is a silence in the earliest pages of human history that feels almost deliberate, as though the ancient world is holding its breath. It is a silence filled not with emptiness but with secrets, names unspoken, footsteps erased, stories left in the shadows because the world was not yet ready to remember them. When people imagine the beginning of humanity, they often picture a garden, two figures, and the tragedy that reshaped every generation after. But between those familiar lines, between the rise of Cain and the grief of Abel, lies a lineage rarely spoken of, a hidden thread woven into the very foundation of the human story. It begins with daughters born into a world so new that the sky itself seemed young. Daughters whose names ripple faintly through ancient traditions like echoes returning from a vast and forgotten cavern. And if you listen closely enough, if you allow the early dust of creation to settle around you, you may sense their presence, quiet, luminous, and essential. This is their story, the one time tried to bury, the one memory creation itself has never fully let go. In those first fragile years outside Eden, the world was raw and untamed. A place where the wind carried the scent of untouched earth and the nights pulsed with a depth of silence unknown to us now. Adam and Eve walked through this wilderness as the first mortals to taste both wonder and sorrow. They carried in their bones the memory of paradise and in their hearts the weight of exile. And it was into this tension between what was lost and what must now be built that their daughters were born. The scriptures tell us of sons, but ancient traditions whisper that daughters came first, emerging into the world with eyes that had never seen anything but the vastness of creation unfolding before them. They were the first women shaped not in a garden of perfection, but in a world where every sunrise was a reminder of both grace and consequence. These daughters, Awen, Azora, and others whose names were carried in the breath of early generations, grew up hearing their parents speak of Eden. They were raised on stories of a place where no thorn pierced the skin, where no shadow carried fear, where the voice of God walked in the coolness of day. But they lived in a world where the ground fought back, where the storms came without warning, where their parents' grief haunted the edges of every memory. And yet, even in this fractured world, these daughters carried something powerful. They were the first to inherit humanity's new beginning. They were the first to learn compassion in a world now shaped by struggle. The first to sing songs that rose from both hope and pain. The first to walk paths no human feet had walked before. As they grew, so did the weight upon their family. The story of Cain and Abel is etched into the heart of every generation, but few imagine what it was like to witness it. These daughters stood at the edges of that familiar tragedy, watching their brothers drift apart, seeing the shadows forming long before the world understood what violence was. They saw the silence in their father's eyes and the trembling in their mother's hands. And when Abel's blood cried out from the ground, it echoed through their lives too. The grief of the first murder did not fall on sons alone. It fell on the daughters, who carried their mother sobbing into the night and tried to understand why a world newly born could already taste death. After Abel's burial, after Cain's exile, the world changed again. Adam and Eve's daughters became the quiet pillars of a fractured family. They tended to the earth with hands that trembled but did not stop. They cared for aging parents who bore the weight of a broken paradise. They were the first women to confront loss, the first to learn resilience, the first to hold together what remained of the world's first home. And with time, they became the bearers of a new kind of strength, one shaped by survival, shaped by sorrow, shaped by the responsibility of building humanity from the ruins of their brothers' conflict. But their significance did not end in the private shadow of grief. As humanity expanded, these daughters became the mothers of nations. The ancient writings describe Awan as gentle and perceptive, a woman whose wisdom shaped early communities. They describe Azura as resilient and deeply attuned to the rhythms of creation, a woman who taught the earliest generations how to nurture life in a world of thorns. Their children inherited not only the physical lineage of Adam and Eve, but the emotional resilience of women who survived the first collapse of human innocence. And yet, for all their importance, history allowed their names to fade. Their sons were remembered because their sons built cities, forged tools, shaped early civilizations. But the women who nurtured them, who passed down the traditions of Eden's memory, who held the fragile world together in its earliest days, were pushed into silence by the passing of time. Still, their influence never vanished. Every whisper of early culture, every spark of early creativity, every lesson carried through the generations held a fragment of what these daughters taught. Their story deepens when Seth was born. Eve named him with a voice still shaking from grief, calling him the one appointed to continue the line Abel left behind. And it was through Seth's line that the daughters of Adam and Eve stepped once more into the hidden architecture of destiny. For Seth's children grew into a people who remembered the holiness of their origins. They preserved the echo of the garden, the reverence for the God who shaped humanity from dust, and the longing for a world restored. And woven quietly into their teachings were the lessons first carried by their unnamed mothers: a reverence for life, an awareness of the cost of disobedience, a tenderness toward creation that had been missing since Eden. Generations later, when Scripture tells us that humanity began to call upon the name of the Lord, that awakening was not born from sudden revelation alone. It grew from stories preserved by mothers, passed from cradle to campfire, from daughter to daughter, from the memory of Eden to the hope of future restoration. These early women, nearly erased by time, became the vessels that carried faith through history's most fragile beginnings. But the story of Adam and Eve's daughters is not simply a tale of forgotten names. It is a portrait of humanity's first attempt to rebuild, a reminder that the world did not begin with heroes or empires, but with ordinary hands trying to mend what had been broken. It shows us that creation's early chapters were shaped not only by the deeds of men, but by the quiet endurance of women whose lives anchored the human story in a world still trembling from divine judgment. Their legacy is the unseen thread in the vast tapestry of human history. Every culture, every lineage, every nation is built on the foundations they laid. Their resilience carried humanity through its darkest beginning. Their tenderness softened the weight of exile. Their hope kept alive the memory of a world humanity was created for but could no longer touch. And so the forgotten daughters of Adam and Eve still speak, though not in words. They speak in the endurance of mothers throughout history, in the wisdom passed through generations, in the strength of those who build in the aftermath of loss. Their story is a reminder that the human journey has always depended on those history tries to silence, that the foundations of the world were shaped as much by gentleness as by strength, as much by hidden labor as by recorded triumph. This is the lineage time tried to forget. And yet the earth remembers.